Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. I'm Dan Labbe, joined by Mary Kay Cabot and Ashley Bastock. I came up with some questions here right before we hit record for this podcast, so we're going to go through a few here as we grind into the off season here for the Cleveland Browns. So here's a subject we've talked a lot about: the needs that this team has. And so I was wondering, let's come up with a hypothetical where, for whatever reason, you can only pick one position. So you can only choose one: defensive tackle, edge rusher, or wide receiver. Which position would you address, Mary Kay?
Oh gosh, this is such a hard one. It's really, really a hard one because there's two different ways I would really, want to answer this, but I have to pick one. And I don't know. I just have to go with receiver. I just feel like DeShaun Watson needs more weapons. And in watching the playoffs, really, seeing the DJ Readers and the big defensive tackles that played so well, Chris Jones and those guys, it really made me realize how much the Browns need one of those guys. But if I were the GM of the Browns and I only had one thing, I would pick the wide receiver, because I think the most important thing for this football team next season is for DeShaun Watson to be successful. And in order for him to be wildly successful, I think he needs more than what he has right now. You're only going to be as good as the guys you are throwing the ball to. And I don't think that he magically is going to be able to transform everyone and turn all these, sort of developmental people into Pro Bowl receivers right away. So I'm going wide receiver, Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver, somebody amazing that can come in here and either complement Amari Cooper really well, or something along those lines, that caliber of player.
Okay, so that being said, Ashley, what is your answer to this question?
That being said, for the sake of discussion, I am actually going to go with defensive tackle, because it is bleak there right now. And I think looking at past Jim Schwartz defenses, and if he does implement, it's been a few years since he's been a D coordinator. We don't know exactly what this defensive system is going to look like. But assuming he goes with that wide nine kind of scheme again, defensive tackles take on a lot more responsibility in a defense like that, because you're creating one-on-one matchups for your pass rushers. So in turn, they kind of, since you're lining them up wider in that nine spot a lot of the time, the defensive tackles could wind up matched up with offensive tackles. So I just think it's a lot more responsibility. And I was looking at, where these guys from this past year ranked in terms of like their defensive grade on PFF. The highest graded guy in the defensive tackle position for the Browns was Taven Bryan with a 60 defensive grade, and that was ranked number 72 in the league among defensive tackles with a minimum snap count. And then the next closest guy is Perrion Winfrey at 128, Jordan Elliott at 131, and Tommy Togiai at 132. So things just were so bad there this year. I think you really need to get like at least one key, really like hardcore guy that can truly make a difference and not count on another year of maybe some of these younger guys like Perrion Winfrey or Jordan Elliott needing to develop, because I think you need that guy like now.
So I'm going edge rusher. I think that, we've talked about it on this podcast, and Ashley, I think I saw you send out a text today about it too before we came on here. It really was Myles Garrett and nothing else. Jadeveon Clowney, I think when you watched, he was getting into the backfield and, you saw number 90 out there. But everybody else was just really like, Alex Wright didn't record a sack. Isaiah Thomas, by the end of the season, he wasn't even active. And that's not to give up on those guys, because I tweeted out at one point this offseason that like, hey, this pass rush was like Myles Garrett and nobody else. They really need edge rushers. And somebody replied, well, I'm not giving up on Alex Wright and Isaiah Thomas. Well, I'm not either. But I also don't want to just count on those two guys. I want to take a little pressure off of them and not just go into next season with one of those two guys or another rookie as my number 2 edge rusher. So I think I would pick edge rusher here because I think it's still a really important position. And I think